call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone. Thank you for getting here with the adverse conditions. So Marcy did say she was sick, so she wasn't going to be able to make it tonight. And then that's the only one we're missing. So we're good. So we'll go around and do a quick roll call.
All right.
We'll just go around the table. I'll start. I'm Ryan Welch, the chair of OSAC.
Kevin France, committee member.
Joel White, committee member.
Kate Senecal, vice chair.
Vanessa Hetzel, committee member.
Peter Ruprecht, committee member.
Tracy Collar, member.
Sean Samuelson, member.
Patrick Hammer, town staff.
Sandy Hammerly, trustee liaison.
All right, thank you all. The agenda approval. Does anyone want to make any additions or corrections to the agenda? I have something we could add, but I think just to keep things brief. The only thing, I mean, we could discuss if we wanted to add this or not, but I do have an updated map and trail ranking spreadsheet from ProStack. That is something that's in our second quarter work plan. I think we have enough time to get that going next meeting, start the discussion, and then start the ranking process, and still have time to get that done if we do that next time. So I think with the weather and everything, I maybe won't propose that we add that, but the good news is that's moving along, and we have, and Corey from OSAC has done a ton of work updating the map, so it's good.
Is that something you could send out between meetings?
Yeah, I
for
think
preparation?
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we do that. I prefer that, honestly. Have a little soak time before we get together.
And I think on that, well, I guess we're sort of discussing it now, but that's okay. We need to see if we agree with the changes he's made to the map. That might not be final, so that might be the first thing to look at. Is the biggest thing he's done is he's expanded town center connectivity to actually being, we used to call that Trail 1. Now it's 1A, B, C, D, E, and F. Like he's actually outlined where he sees all the trails connecting, and we just maybe want to make sure that's complete before we vote or start ranking. So, but we'll table that till next time. So, but any other corrections or changes? All right, well, let's move on. All right, we're to public comment. We actually have more public here than we maybe have seen in a long time, so welcome. So if you'd like to make comment, please just come up to the microphone, state your name, and have at it. Oh, okay. So you're just here to watch tonight? Okay, great. Well, welcome. We hope you enjoy our meeting. But thanks for being here, especially with the weather and all that. So we'll get right into it. All right, Patrick, you are up with an executive session purposes presentation.
Yeah. So this actually goes back to the committee training, and actually I think this was, Kate, the question you had.
Yeah.
And maybe Marcy had something to add to it as well about why are there certain things that we can discuss, and it seems like we're forthcoming, and then why are there things that all of a sudden we get kind of stonewall about. So the board can go into an executive session anytime they want, and the context for OSAC is typically going to be when it's starting to strategize or come into actual negotiations to purchase open space. The other opportunities would be if there's something personnel related, if there's some other kind of operation in town that's not quite consumable for the public that could sway a discussion one way or the other or cause an employee like future harm, like if there's a personnel issue and that could impact somebody's ability to get a job elsewhere. And case in point, since you guys are now aware of it, is, you know, for several years, the town and the Trust for Public Land have had ongoing negotiations. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. But as it's been heating up, which is due in large part to Tracy and Reed kind of invigorating with those guys and getting Justin kind of back on board, we'll have those conversations when little bits of information come available. And that's why sometimes you'll see something, I'll get a hard stop. And to be honest, and Sandy probably even back me up on this one or explain it a little bit different, a lot of times staff doesn't also, we're not privy to it. I've been here 10 years and I've been in exec session twice, and the content of that was told to me, you know, as I go into that meeting. And some of that was community center related, which is now off the books. you guys remember when we were potentially looking at buying Lakeshore. And then obviously, early on, we had a discussion about, at that time, what was level 3. So that's why sometimes you'll get that kind of change in direction or a hard stop for us. And then on the agendas, what you'll see is it's pretty vague. It just says the town will be going into an executive session for purposes of negotiation, personnel, something. I mean, it's pretty generic language. I found a couple of cool PDFs that I am more than happy to send out to you guys. But it is one of those, you know, a lot of times those are negotiations between the board, Matt, and Kendra kind of takes the lead, is my assumption. And Matt, rightfully so, keeps as many of us out of it. That way there's not this kind of inadvertent leak of information. We kind of get pulled into it when it's appropriate for us to get pulled into it. But I wanted to make sure that we had that follow-up because I thought that that was a pretty valid question that you guys have. And for OSAC, it probably is the most impactful to your group. It's not like we go into exec session talk about trails or art, you know, but the acquisition of land, yeah, that's a different ballgame. So, any questions around that? Is there an interest to, I can send something out if you guys want it. We can, we thought about throwing it in that committee training manual. So, I'm more than happy to answer questions on it, but it was a great question. So.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add is there's a couple of us on the board who absolutely prefer that we never go into executive session. So it tends that unless we really feel like it's something that we need to discuss confidentially, you know, that relates to a position for negotiation, we're not going to do it. You know, I'm particularly sensitive because of some of the impressions that came out related to the Tesla decisions that a lot of people felt that, and I think several of us after that said we need to stay away from executive sessions as much as we can. But when we are negotiating terms of the deal or discussing, you know, what are we willing to do, we do have to sometimes go into executive session. So, you know, I for one don't like them and really don't want to do it unless we have to. So I hope that, you know, I really don't want you guys to ever feel like we're doing anything behind your back, because we're not. And for someone like me, frequently when we say we're going to do it, I'm going, okay, so what is it that we're talking about here that we cannot discuss publicly? And even, I think several meetings ago, we had one, and we got to the point where I said, wait a minute, guys, we're talking about stuff that's not executive session. We need to come out if we're going to continue this. And the town attorney will do the same thing for us, because it's not an opportunity for us just to talk behind closed doors. So
Yep.
I just, you know, we'll tell you as much as we can, but when it gets to a negotiating position, that's when we usually have to do it.
And I will reiterate that the few opportunities I've had, that conversation is like very tight, and the attorney and Matt tend to corral. Nope. Yep. Nope. That's a different subject. This is applicable to that. It's one of the few times where I feel like Kendra Kendra's very good about saying here's the parameters, but that's kind of her show, and it's almost kind of impressive because it's very cut and dry, very cut and dry. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's just helpful for us to know and
Yeah.
other committees to know, just for the fact of, I don't have a lot of people that ask questions about what all OSAC does, but I do imagine just at times it's going to come up about what exactly happens in executive sessions. And I've always been equipped with, I don't actually know what happens. And so being able to say executive sessions are saved for confidential conversations, likely due to some sort of negotiation or personnel issue, I think that is absolutely plenty of information that, at least for me as a resident of Superior. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the other thing could be, you know, obviously if we're in a legal case,
Yeah.
that would be the other
Yeah.
situation where we would go into executive session, because we can't discuss that.
Yeah, I don't know if we need any, I mean, I don't feel like I need
Okay.
additional stuff. I do think it would be a good idea to get that into the committee training.
Okay.
I think if we've got the questions, I think others, and like Kate said, I think just being able to answer the question, what is executive
Yeah.
session? If we can just say, like, exactly what you said, we know, and then we can communicate to others what it is. I think that's good, so, okay. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I think if anyone has further questions, they can just reach out to Patrick and be willing to provide that information.
Agreed.
Marcy, who's not here.
Okay. All right, well, let's get into the meaty stuff. So the HHR reservoir protection measures and recommendation. So hopefully you all had a chance to look at Peter's work. I can tell you put a lot of work into that. It looks good.
Everybody helped.
Sure, I know, but you obviously took the time to reformat, right? The format you had 3 weeks ago was very different than what you have here, so I can tell, you put a lot of time and effort into this. So I think what the goal here tonight is just to get a final wrap on what it looks like. We need it to be done before we can make the recommendation. I think that when we make the recommendation, what we'll do is we'll put this document in the end of the minutes. So I think we probably have a week to kind of clean it up. I mean, do you think that's fair? If we have a recommendation ready and the document done in a week, that's okay? Because the recommendation would come out in the next board packet, which would be 10 days from now.
No, the packet will come out Tuesday of next week.
Tuesday of next week, so we'll want to try to have the minutes done and this document in the packet. So we'll need to have it done by Monday, so that's pretty short order. I don't think we have, Peter, do you think we have a lot of changes we need to make? Okay, I think that's doable. Let's shoot for that, and if we don't get there, we don't get there. But let's make that our goal. Seem reasonable? Okay, so do you want to take it away on questions you have? Or?
Yeah. Should we project it, or?
I don't know
Is there a
how to
good way
get it from here. That's going to be the problem. I don't have, it has to come from the town computer here to get the document up.
Can't we just,
Can I sign in
Patrick,
Google? I
Do
did that
several
one.
have copies, like?
could we
Content
actually
is a-
project this as a Google Doc up on the screen for everyone to see?
Were you copied on the link? I can forward
Send
it.
it to me really quick and I can save it.
You
Yeah,
got it
I just
either
need
way.
to get online.
I'm just trying to get online.
I have trouble getting online here for some reason.
Mine might be working.
Oh, it's a certificate.
I just got it. Let's see.
Oh, okay, I'm on. But does someone else have it?
Working on it.
Patrick, will you need this?
Find it.
So we're just having, so Sandy and I are just kind of, this was a request from the town board out of the dinner discussion. There may be an opportunity for actual presentation on it, but, so we're just trying to hash through the timing a little bit.
Okay.
So right now, I can put it in the notes,
Okay.
and then either myself in the weekly communication to the board, or
Yeah, I
Sandy
mean,
and I can chat about making sure.
I was just trying to figure out the best way to make sure that the board, we read the minutes, but
Yes.
it tends to be in a big old packet, and it may be flashed over, so for me, it's an important item, and I want to make sure the board pays attention to it. So I can certainly call attention to it in my individual report. Please go out and, review this. This was something we asked OSEC to do. And so for me, it's more the question of, am I sure they'll go out and review it before we do a Zaharias? Or should we consider having you guys come in and just talk about it briefly at a meeting? So,
Well, and
Would it be enough? Would it be
maybe I can just bring it up in
And
the
that same
report.
link is the last one you sent me a while ago.
Well, and I'll plan to
I just
come
sent
and
you
read the
one right now.
recommendation because it's important enough
Okay.
in public comment.
Okay, that would be perfect.
The other thing that our thought is on this is that, we want this ready, so when any sort of development plan comes forward, here's our standard. But when we get a chance to see the development, we're also going to remind the board of the standard that we had
True.
put out there. So there will be a second chance once that development does come into a more public arena. But we think it would be better if whoever's reviewing the application knows about it ahead of time rather than after the fact.
Yeah, because I was just saying whether it would make sense to go ahead and publish it out on the OSAC webpage
Mhm.
too, because then
Yep.
it's very public, so that as anybody developing that property starts to move forward, they don't
That'd
have
be
to
the
go out
plan.
and find it in the minutes or somewhere.
No, the plan will be to put it right up there, just like our
Okay.
Town 15 talking paper
Okay.
Okay,
and
then
others.
that'll be
That's,
great.
at least that's my understanding. Please
Yeah.
correct me if you all have a different view.
I think that's great.
Okay.
Well, are we planning on adding this live tonight?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure you want a hard copy of it. I think you want to do it off the Google Doc instead of a hard copy of it.
All right, so I sent him the link to the Google Docs so that,
So while Patrick's bringing that up, the recommendation that we'll make is not going to be this document. It's going to be some other language. While he's bringing that up, I did try to write this ahead of time, just so we didn't have to, writing these is kind of weird in a meeting.
Yep.
So I think my wording needs a little bit of work, but right when we're done, I have a good start, and then we can wordsmith it, and then we'll be ready to go.
Cool.
Awesome.
so I was really glad for all the comments that you all put in, both in respect to the content and the writing style. Those were both really good. Clearly a lot of careful reading from everybody. I left a couple of comments in there that I thought might be good for us to talk about. Oh, cool, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
And so, right in the first sentence of the executive summary, which I thought was kind of important, there was a question on the wording here about the reservoir and nearby area being an important wildlife resource for Superior. Tracy, do you want to talk a little bit about why you think resource is or is not the right word there?
It's not how I view it, and maybe it's just because the terminology is not commonplace for that. I would say wildlife habitat, but I'd love, where did that word come from? Did you write it, or did it come from the original doc?
I probably wrote it at one point.
Okay, so I'd love to know your thoughts on what makes it a resource. I just don't see it as defining that word, really. But I'm also
What does resource mean to you?
very nitpicky about terminology.
So I do see the word resource in this context in other kind of open space related documents that come out of other entities as being something that is used by a community. So a resource is something that's used by somebody. And so, a property like this or an environment like this might thus be considered to be a resource. One reason why it might not be is that it's not really very available to the community at large
I know.
at present.
It's funny, I actually, when I read it, and I read it after Tracy highlighted it for resource, I liked that you add that it was important wildlife resource, as if it's a resource to the wildlife, not necessarily to the humans that are living here. Does that make sense? That it's more about how HHR really provides a lot of opportunity for wildlife within
I like that reframing.
Town of Superior.
And I
That's
don't know
how I
if
read
it helps, but here's the definition from our trusty internet here. But it says a stock or supply of money, materials, staff, or other assets that can be drawn on by a person or organization in order to function effectively. So if you look, thinking about it from the wildlife, it fits perfectly, I think.
Well, you guys' explanations are way better than mine.
I'm not firm on it. I can be swayed either way. I just wanted it to be noted.
Yeah, well, I want the first sentence to be something that we're all, jazzed about, so.
Yeah.
I like it with the preface of wildlife resource. Like if it just said important resource for Superior.
Right.
I would probably say we reword it, but the fact it says important wildlife resource, I think that ties into it well.
Cool. All right, so the next question I think is a bit more substantive. And so the question is whether, oops, let me do the right one here. So here we're saying why we think the property around Hodgson Harris is valuable as open space. And I had written that it helps retain value for Superior's monetary investment in the reservoir restoration. And I wanted a reason for why why we're retaining value. And so the reason for that I thought was that it was kind of a public good and people could value that as a viewing resource. But Tracy makes the great point that the restoration in and of itself is a valuable thing. And so that maybe should be broken out, you know, as its own item, that we spent the money, here's this resource which now exists, and great. And separate out the public viewing access as a separate thing. And so I agree with that sentiment, but I just wanted to check with everybody else before changing a major recommendation in here.
I'll offer the thought that keeping it separate, the investment does make a stronger point that at some point in the past, the town thought it was important enough to invest $600,000 into restoring it. So I think it makes that point, and maybe we could word it. I don't even know if we need to reword it, but I tend to agree that there are two bullets there.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's two.
Awesome. Well, that's continuing to be excellent input. I will, I'll make that edit. Then the next question was regarding the ordering of the recommendations. And I guess I have to admit that I more or less ordered these with the open space buffer being the most important at the top, and the rest of them just by the size of the description.
So there's a method.
Not necessarily by any importance. And, you know, Tracy made the point that
typing on my phone.
that pollution prevention is actually really quite important. So if you all are okay with moving that up as a higher priority to make it seem like a prioritized list rather than you know, alphabetized or something else like that. Yeah, cool. You guys are awesome. We're flying. I'll just note, Kate, that I put in the numbers
Cool,
there
thank
from the birding documents.
So, just one other thing, could we actually try and get, if this is the executive summary, I'd like it all on one page somehow.
It is
Like
it is
your-
currently on one page.
Okay, not on the Google Doc, sorry. It goes over the 2 pages.
Okay.
I just want to make sure, like a resume, you put all your most important stuff first on that one page. So
Yep.
format everything.
I will absolutely make sure about that. And I think that Trustee Lacey specifically asked for one page. So I want to give him what he asked for. So this is basically the same thing that we just talked about, breaking that into 2 points. And then I had a question on, oops, wait, sorry, here's one more comment regarding the prairie dogs on the Zaharias property. One of the things that was specifically asked from OSAC to the consultants who made the environmental reports that we got was what happens to the raptors that live around there when those prairie dogs disappear. And I didn't call that out in this document specifically because the Smith environmental consulting report used the word limited or negligible about the overall impact on raptors. I personally don't agree with that, but if we want to reference the report, you know, I don't necessarily want to contradict that. So I don't know what you all think makes a stronger statement there, is to kind of go with, you know, what's in my heart and probably what is in many of your all hearts, or with, you know, what the report that we paid for says. So thoughts on that?
I agree with leaving it out based on that.
Yeah, I'd be
information.
inclined to go with the report that we commissioned.
My thought is, if there was something that was recommended and we went the other way, it could really hurt the credibility of the entire document, and
Yeah.
that would be bad for all of us.
Well, I kind of feel the same way, that it
Yeah.
probably would have an impact, but I don't know anything about, the hunting size of a raptor, and I'm assuming Smith knows a lot more than I do since my level is 0. I'm kind of in the same boat as, I think if we're going to lean on it for things that we agree with, we can't then leave it out, you're contradicted in the report. So.
Right. All right, any disagreement on that? Cool.
So, Peter, just
Yeah.
as a counterpoint, when I was on the HHR tour this last weekend, we did see a raptor flying above us while we were seeing all the wildlife on the reservoir. Obviously, there is raptor activity, and obviously they are going after prairie dogs mostly there. So, I mean, I have a hard time leaving that out, but on the other hand, it might be better to focus more on the relocation aspect of it in that case, as opposed to.
Just to counter that, we've seen evidence of the owls, one in Community Park, and we just got sent one today that's somewhere down here, right, that are not adjacent to the reservoir, that obviously are thriving. So I don't know if that's evidence or not, but.
Well, they have a pretty wide range, don't they, that they go over? Plus, that's in a non-developed area. That's a huge part that they're in. So we're talking about development right next to the reservoir, which could have an impact. So anyway, I personally have a hard time with it as well. And if we're just going by that one resource, then yes. If we're going to go by multiple resources, I'm sure we could find some other resource on the internet through Boulder County that could say, it's important. They have a wide range, it's important. We've seen evidence of it just on that one tour we were on. And I have a hard time with it, but there's other things to focus on.
Yeah, well, I'm over there all the time. I see hawks on that open space frequently. But again, I'm not a professional biologist either, so. And there's also not a raptor nest, as far as I know, immediately in that vicinity, so. Yeah. Because there's no trees, yeah. And kind of the last thing was in the conclusion. Again, like we want the first sentence to look good, it would be good to have the last sentence look good. And so we want the trustees to consider development proposals with a careful eye to the impact on habitat. Obviously, we're saying that throughout this document. And then the end of it is that we want the development to result in a net improvement to the overall quality of life in Superior. Is that just too obvious to say, or is that a good wrap-up?
I don't think so.
I can't really tell.
I think
that's the point we're trying to drive home.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, I think from a committee, that's like the one thing we continue to try to do about all of them. So I say we put that on everything.
Okay.
Oh, I love that sentence.
All right. So,
Man, that's not that much. That's good.
yeah. Cool. So, I don't know, do you have a resolution for us, assuming that I make the very straightforward changes that
I have
that we've
a
done here?
start of one, but I think it needs some work because I was just thinking about it today. But my resolution, as written so far, recommendation, thank you, was OSAC recommends the board use the Hodgson-Harris preservation document when considering any development proposals adjacent to the reservoir regarding specific protection measures the developer should include in a development plan. So developer and development is redundant in there. And it's kind of hard since you can't see it, right? Sometimes you need to see these things to, so do you want me to read that again slower?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
OSAC recommends the board use the Hodgson-Harris preservation document, which will, we'll just have to list it by name because I mean, we could say which is available on the OSAC website. I don't know what do you guys think? Should we reference where the document is, or should we just, will the board know where it is? I mean, if it's in the notes and in the packet, I mean,
Yeah, because eventually it'll actually be included in the FDP recommendation. So I wouldn't worry too much about
Okay.
like stating where it's going to sit. 'Cause
Okay.
At some point, it'll actually become the document that the board sees when they review the final development plan.
So I put kind of a crappy title on there, which you could reference, or we could rework that to match what you had as well.
we can use, should we use the title? I mean, it's a more concrete link between one document, from this recommendation to that document.
Should we call it considerations, or should it be more strong?
I think maybe recommendations or,
We should tell them that this is, don't consider it, listen to this.
is there a stronger word that you would even use?
The only, I wonder if we should remove the word development from that document. Because this isn't just a development document, right? And we want to be a little bit careful. I mean, we are making recommendations to improve the quality, right? One of them was the water level. One of them was foliage around the Saddlebrook property.
So maybe habitat preservation instead of sensitive development.
Has recommendations for habitat preservation, yeah?
Yeah,
I like that.
I'm going to just go ahead and change that in the Google Docs so I remember.
And then you're changing considerations to recommendation.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I can edit this one for you
No.
to see, but
in your last sentence of the recommendation, it says protection, but as just referenced, the whole document has far more than just protection.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So I think you should omit that.
I should change that. So what did we say? Recommendations for
Habitat preservation around
habitat
HHR.
preservation. Okay. Document, okay, so OSAC recommends the board use the recommendations for habitat preservation around Hodgson-Harris Reservoir document when considering any development proposals adjacent to the reservoir regarding specific protection measures that developers should include in a development plan. The development is in there 3 times. The wording is bad. Okay, so we should use this document, what for? I guess that's where it's falling apart a little bit.
is there a different word for development plan? I mean, that's kind of what a developer would submit, right?
You use the word application.
Oh, okay. Any development application?
Or development submittal.
I mean, and I wonder if we just shorten this
I think
document
so.
when considering any development applications adjacent to the reservoir.
Yes. full
I mean,
stop.
and get rid of all this other stuff about regarding specific protection measures regarding, what the developer should do. That's kind of in the title.
Yep.
Now that we've got a better title in there, it's simpler and easier to read.
And the executive summary describes everything else beyond that, so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess short and sweet is probably better, huh, than something wordy. Okay, so let me reread this. OSAC recommends the board use the recommendations for habitat preservation around Hodgson-Harris Reservoir document when considering any development application adjacent to the reservoir.
I like that better.
Simple, yeah.
Okay?
They'll have plenty of wordiness up here, so.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a recommendation. So just so we're all clear, I'll read the recommendation again, and then we'll get a motion to have someone make a recommendation as read. Get a second, we'll vote. OSAC recommends the board use the recommendations for habitat preservation around Hodgson Harris Reservoir document when considering any development applications adjacent to the reservoir.
What does the motion sound
Just
like?
I'd like to make a motion as read.
That's right, yeah.
I'd like to make a motion as read.
I second it.
All right, all in favor? All right, passes unanimously. Okay, awesome.
Great job on that. And then remember, when that application comes forward, we'll do the in-depth. So you'll then make another recommendation on top of this recommendation.
And the timing hopefully will be that the plan will come forward, we'll have a chance to review, and then come back and make recommendations of things that maybe we feel aren't following this. That would be the course of how that should work.
No, I have not heard the timeline. I don't know if you guys have heard the timeline, but I think that we were going to start to push to try to get something by summer, midsummer.
I mean, I know it's on the list of upcoming, but it doesn't have a, last I looked, it didn't have a date. So we just need to watch out for that in board packets, and then make sure that after we see it on a board packet that we get it on an agenda. And if we feel like it might come out right after we have a meeting, we may want to call a special meeting just to discuss that, just to make sure we are able to get feedback in a timely manner back to the board.
Well, my request has been that as soon, I'm still pushing for this, as soon as an application is submitted to the town, that it be published, which is what they do in the city of Louisville. I mean, literally, the minute it comes in and Stephen has it in his hot little hands, so you guys could actually could start reviewing it long before the board, or, because we can't look at it until it actually is officially presented to us. But I really want the citizenry to have the opportunity to view it way longer, because you guys aren't on the clock to review something starting on the Tuesday before a board meeting. So really, the public needs to have as much lead time to review this as possible. So to the best of my knowledge, nothing has been submitted at this point, but I'm going to continue to push that the minute it is submitted, it becomes a public document, and all related documents would be available for you to review. And for example, this document could be placed right in the file along with, because this is a recommendation related to that. So it could be placed in the file.
Okay.
So to clarify.
Keep your fingers crossed, that's what
Yes.
actually happened.
That would be amazing. This recommendation will go to the board, and the board will get this full document, because we will all get asked about this from people interested in HHR.
So what will happen is, this will be an official recommendation, and I'll email it to, well, I'll make sure to get it into the minutes, because I'll wrap them up. So then we'll paste the final document into the end of the minutes, so they'll be captured there, and then we'll put it right on the website when we're done.
But as far as the board's eyes seeing it, they
So
will see the recommendation, and they will get the document in their packet as well, right?
Yeah, it'll be
Okay.
in the packet.
Because it'll be in the minutes, which they'll have.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'll call attention to it. But, I mean, if I have it for the next meeting, I'll say, okay, remember at our meeting, we asked OSAC to prepare this. It is in the packet. I strongly recommend that you read it ASAP, and then remember to read it again at the time we actually are presented with Zaharias. And then I'll probably be a little snarky and say, and I hope that will also be, when we actually receive the packet or the presentation, that this would be presented on the development website, because this is official comment regarding that development proposal.
And then my plan will be to show up, read the recommendation, and then I'll call out a few things. I'll call out that we have a section specific to development, but the document isn't only around development, it's holistic around the reservoir. And then I'll also probably just read the first paragraph or two of this document, just to give it a little bit more color than we have in the recommendation. So that'll be my plan. Cool? We good?
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. That's huge getting that done. Yeah, that's a long time coming, so awesome. Good job. All right, next one is our rankings. So everyone, yeah, I'll take that because I'm going to need to through this. So I sent you out the preliminary results. I don't know if anyone was surprised by the outcome. It came out pretty close to what I thought, but the real interesting thing was that we do have a new number one. And so there it is. Zaharias takes over from CenturyLink as our number one ranked property.
CenturyLink has a typo.
What's that?
CenturyLink has a typo.
Century. All right, I'll fix that.
Did you die when you were looking through the whole document then, Tracy? The whole ranking, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry about that.
No,
Next time
not
we'll
your
spell
fault.
check before, well, it might be because I sent out the document. So,
I think Rogers is actually without a D.
all right, well, we'll go clean this up, obviously, before we get it into our
Firing
document.
squad.
I think the other interesting thing for me that came out of this, which was a interesting thing that we realized last time, is that there were two tiers. There was kind of the top three, and then there was everything else. Last time, Rogers was in that top three, and Town 15 was not. It's kind of interesting how those swapped, but a lot has happened, right? Town 15 was kind of in the spotlight since we did this last time. Rogers is now under development, so
Yeah.
it's changed quite a bit.
And it shrank too. I mean,
Yeah.
what we could get is a lot less than what it was.
Right, well, and the other news there is there is most likely a development plan coming forward for the rest of that property. So, what we were ranking is what will be left, and if something comes forward and if it gets approved, then there's nothing left to rank or to acquire there. So, I guess there's a few things that we should discuss around this. Do we want to go around and talk about why we rank things a certain way, or why things came out a certain way? I mean, we've done that in the past.
I think the first thing we discussed is the weighting. Number one, I think we had discussed, these are numbers based on 15% across the board, right? Which is 105%, which I disagree with. You should just average the numbers. If you're going to do it that, just average them together. Okay, that's the first
Well,
thing.
I do have a comment on that, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Because in the past, we didn't use these raw numbers as the total ranking. We used how we averaged 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and averaged that to get the overall ranking. And it does make a difference, because if you look at this, if we rank it by these totals, you do get a different ranking than when we average by the rank order of the properties. And I almost think you have to do that way, because everybody is calibrated differently when they're setting their numbers. Not to, like, if you just look at some people's, their ranks are, 7 to 4, some are 9 to 2, right? They just are calibrated differently. So, I mean, we can have a discussion on that, but we do need to decide, are we putting a ranking out by these raw numbers, or are we, when you take those numbers and then you get a rank order per person, and then averaging those to get your rank?
Okay.
Because you do get a different answer.
Right, so I think we should go with the raw numbers, but I also think that we need to do a weighted system up to 100%, not 105%, where we need to decide, do we want them all to be the same weight, or do you want certain things to be more weight? Because obviously the realistic scores only account for 2 categories of the, 7? There's 7 categories.
Well, I will say, we already did discuss this and we did decide this.
No, we didn't. We did not. No, we did not. We discussed at the first meeting, and then I brought up the second meeting, and I said, let's do 10% for the first 5, and then 25% for the last 2 per thing. So you have 50% weighted on the top, 50% weighted on the
I'll
bottom.
say I disagree, because we never sent out the document that way. I have no recollection of that decision, and I don't think it was documented as such. And the document didn't go out that way, and it wasn't raised after the document went out, so.
What do you think
We
we
were,
decided on?
no. We were scoring regardless of the weight, though. That's what we told everyone. We would.
You're talking about a long-term versus a short-term ranking. We talked about having 2 different rankings, a short-term and a long-term.
Yes, that is correct.
And so that might be where
It's
we're
not,
getting.
but it's not long-term versus short-term, it's realistic versus ideal, right? The
Okay.
ideal is the top 5, regardless of if it's available or not. The realistic is the top 5 and then you add in the bottom two, which is availability of it.
So you know what's interesting? I went and played with these numbers. You change, you throw this number up to, 50%. I mean, yes, it doesn't scale
Well,
exactly.
25% for.
Well, but I'm making a point. The rank, I mean, I guess actually it does.
Yeah.
But the top three, but still, when you draw the line on the top three, yeah, so down in the lower ranking, it's moving around a little bit. But it was an interesting observation that actually putting those two factors up a ton didn't make a huge difference in the rankings.
I think it's important to note that though, because the board specifically asked for that in
Mhm.
what, August of 2018 at their dinner or their work session?
It's open to discussion. I don't really care. We'll do whatever the group decides they want to do. If we want to do it off the numbers, I feel that doing it off the numbers, one person can skew the results by having a different calibration than somebody else. And trying to get everybody calibrated on these numbers is really difficult.
I do want to point out it's just semantics, so long and short is ideal and realistic.
Yes,
Again,
correct.
Speaking the
Right.
same thing.
I like the raw data. My mathematics background, 105% drives me crazy, but I'm okay. I would prefer to see it, 12.67% to add up to 100, but that's a
Well, again,
OCD thing.
It's just equal weighting, right? So you just average
Yeah.
them. You don't need to do weightings. The weightings was just for the purpose of if you want to do more weighted in one versus another. So, like I said, you just average each column. I can do that real quick. You just use the average function.
What's the argument though, Sean? Like, we do want the weighting for the short-term ideal category.
Well, it changes how things are ranked, obviously, because idealistically, yeah, CenturyLink would be the one we want. It has the most acreage, it has the most impact, or the most feedback from the community in terms of just sheer size. Zaharias is another big one, right? But Zaharias has it, we know that it is for sale, whereas CenturyLink is not. Also, Zaharias has an application for development potentially on it. So that has a different slant to it. So it's, those are the two views that, we've been talking about doing, right?
I struggled with that exact comparison for the fact it's like CenturyLink doesn't have a development plan, but it's also not for sale.
Right.
So which one of those is the better situation, that it's actively for sale or that it doesn't have a development plan? Because I think those two things are kind of a balancing act, right?
Right, neither. They're both poor. So that would put like the 76th Street property more attainable and higher on the list.
Yeah.
Right, but the fact that Zaharias actually, it is for sale, but that it does have an application submitted to the town, it means it's more at risk of being developed in CenturyLink at this point.
Absolutely, agreed, but
that's-
it's also more available to buy because it is for sale, whereas CenturyLink, they're not, nobody's even named a price that we've ever heard, right?
Well, it's not more available to buy right at this moment, though. It may be more available to buy if the plan comes out, it gets rejected, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, it's equal because we can't do anything about it.
Putting a short-term list saying Zaharias is number one, we'd get in trouble from the board for that because we shouldn't be making that recommendation.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's just not something, because there's an active development plan, we shouldn't be pushing that.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
So then do we just go back to only keeping the last, or the top 5 categories, not worrying about the attainable versus management, just making a footnote that, these are the scores, the top 5 categories are the scores that we came up with.
Right, what
And this is
happens
how
if
it
you-
falls out.
What happens if you zeroed out the last two?
Well, we can do all that.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this. So here's the thing, and this was one question I wanted to ask. When I sent this out, I didn't send it out. So I've linked it all together. So as you change these, it's changing everybody's rankings and everything. I didn't know if people were conscientious about how they scored things. They didn't want other people to see them. I'm happy to send out the full spreadsheet so everyone can play with the numbers and see how it comes out.
No, I thought it was
I'm
the way to
fine
do
with
it.
everybody seeing mine.
I am too.
I think it's interesting discussion to see how people look at them. To me, when I was doing this, like, the only thing I thought was kind of hard and fast, and I really was careful with my rankings on, was the size, because it was a tangible thing. This
Yep.
one's 20 acres, this one's 5 acres, so I kind of had to put a sliding scale in there of what I ranked each one based on that. I mean, I think it's always interesting discussion to see what somebody else thinks. I put a footnote in mine around the water on CenturyLink, because it doesn't really have water, but the town's water source is there, which to me is kind of an important side note to water. And so I struggled a lot with how to rank water on that versus Zaharias, which has a very clear resource of water, right?
So yeah, you get a very similar result.
The top three come out, I mean, it depends on which ranking we use. I guess if we just go off the raw numbers, it goes, I did it the wrong way, sorry. Zaharias, CenturyLink, Town 15, and then, oh, shoot, I have something else in there that it's kind of messing that up. 76 moves up from 6 to, or no, it was 4 to 6. Third Avenue drops, and but it's all these ones are so
I think
close.
that's in the noise.
Well, and that's
9
what we-
versus 6 doesn't really matter.
But that's what we determined last time, is that there are 3 that are
Yeah.
the top priority, and then there's these other ones that, we shouldn't ignore, because if something comes up or there's an opportunity, we should consider it. But it's not, everything else being equal, we wouldn't make a recommendation of one of these over one of the other ones.
Yeah.
So the first action is I will send the whole document out when, tomorrow to everyone, so you can change all of these percentages and watch how all the different rankings get edited or update as you mess around with it. The fact that the raw numbers and the ranking averaging don't really change the answer that much. I don't know if I really care which way we go on this. I tend to agree 105 for me is weird. I just, my mind doesn't work that way either. So the question is, do people want to play with this? Do people want to mess around with this? Do we want to come back next meeting and finalize this, or are we ready to finalize it the way it is?
My question would be, as a group, what do we feel about those rankings? My initial reaction was, I'm surprised CenturyLink wasn't a clear number 1. But
Yeah.
that's my opinion, and, I ranked it such that it was a 1, and everybody should think like me, and you'd be just like that. So, when I look at them, I'm okay with Zaharias' 1 and CenturyLink is 2, because they're close.
Super close.
It's interesting to look at, where they're so close in both categories, right? It just, and again, the top 3 are just, either way we look at it are so different, are so much,
So when we look at this, you and Ryan both have 1 and 1. Does that mean it was a tie in your weighted rankings?
yes, that means they, when we evened out before with those 15%, they weren't a
Yeah.
tie.
Got it.
But now, so if I go back to look at mine, right, see, they're exactly the same number. So they're a tie, yeah.
So, just as a thing about the weightings in the different categories, I think probably one of the reasons why Zaharias is higher up in the rankings now than it was last year is that we included water near rather than necessarily on the property. And so that's, like Joel mentioned, that's a 10 for Zaharias, maybe a 1 or 2 for CenturyLink. So that probably balances them out. And I think for me, I actually had CenturyLink higher in every category except the attainability. So it would have been my number 1, except for the water.
Yeah.
So if not for the water issue and some of the attainability things, for me, clearly CenturyLink was the top preference. But because of that particular category, it shuffled it around a little bit.
Yeah, I will admit, I went through and did mine and then looked at my results and thought, well, that doesn't seem
Yeah.
right. And then went back and kind of edited back down to what, you know, like, okay, well, I might not do a 10 here, it's an 8, and then this one goes from a 7 to a 6.
Isn't that
And,
funny?
you know, bringing things around, because the first time through, just blindly ranking them in columns, my numbers were weird. Like, I didn't like what I got to, you know, and so I went back and kind of revisited everything.
You can't cook the data like that.
No, I like the
Well,
blindness
the hard part
aspect
is,
of it.
I mean, we kind of got to this point last time, where like with so few, you could look at them and just say, based on what you know of the properties, what you think the rank order would be. We wanted to do this just to give it a little bit more scientific approach.
I liked it better than last year. The only thing it doesn't take into consideration is the location of CenturyLink, that it affects the view of so many citizens, whereas Zaharias does not affect that. So that's, I think, obviously why Zaharias and the water quality put it as number 1. It's a natural open space parcel that should be high on the list. So that's something we could add, you know, view aspect of.
Well, category
Number of
1 is
citizens.
One of
aesthetic.
those, it is, yeah. That is kind of taken into account.
The first category is named aesthetic.
Yeah.
If you go back to the, up there in the corner. So that is,
I didn't read it as affecting
Yeah, but
the
the attribute doesn't really,
views. I mean, it's pretty unattractive land.
I mean,
to
we
me.
could add a note next time that it's
Well, maybe that's
also,
just me.
you know, view corridor or, you know,
Mhm.
views or something
That'd be
along
better.
that line. I mean, my initial thought is this came out pretty close to what I thought it would. Came out pretty close to last time, which would have been shocked if it was very different. So I think we, you know, one approach would be to just choose one of the, you know, choose some numbers here, weightings, and we have our numbers, and that's what we would list as our ranking in our document. The other option would be to send out the document, let everybody play with the rankings, and come back with a recommendation on how they want to move forward next time.
Well, to your point that you made earlier about, you know, Zaharias is 1, we get in trouble on the board on that. I mean,
No, well,
what,
but we're not,
No, if it was 1 as a short term, like we want
Yeah,
Zaharias
ideal situation.
today.
yeah, if we.
And that's our top priority to
sorry, I
buy
didn't
today.
catch that subtlety when you said it the first time, because I thought, well, then why did we rank it? But
Yeah, no, I think
understood
it
now.
was the thought, I mean, because this came up when Town 15 was coming up, because
Right.
we said it was number 3, but it's really the most realistic right now, and they're like, well, how do you differentiate between this ideal and realistic? And that's what we're grasping with, is can we, you know, should we be doing that? And how do we, you know, the thought was we could just play with these numbers and come up with you know, different rankings.
Yep.
As we're seeing, though, the top 3 stick out so far that changing those numbers
Yeah.
isn't moving the ranking around much at all.
I like the weighted that you came up with because it can be moved if the board asks us for that information.
Well, that's a good point.
So if it's, I mean, we don't need to put it out there, I guess, if we're not all on board with it, but it's still an option if they ask for it.
I agree with liking the weighting. I mean, I think overall, you know, we've seen you can change it to 50%, change it last to 50%, or change it to 0, and you still get roughly the same answer. But I like the weighting, like Tracy said, because it allows you to have a little bit more depth behind just one number if that information is requested.
I mean, one option is to make them all even and go with this set of numbers. I mean, the first group, and we have a rank. We have to go off the average and not the sum, just because we have one NA in here. So totally fine, like someone chooses not to rank based on proximity or whatever is going on. So we, you know, I should just get rid of this sum column, because the average column is what we'll go off of. Again, I don't think it really mattered. Even if you do it by the sum, I think you still got the same answer, but it's a better approach. All right, let me ask this a different way. Is anybody opposed to making the first set of numbers and the rank with equal weighting of the 14.3 as the final ranking for the properties. Is anyone opposed to that?
What?
No, I'm just saying, is anyone opposed to saying we'll use equal ranking for each?
Oh,
we'll
yeah, you mean average, yeah.
Sorry, we'll just use these as the numbers. I might need to go around these to make these numbers look better, and then using these numbers, the actual ranking numbers, as the numbers rather than each person's rank order, and then this becomes our final ranking. Anyone opposed?
No. I love it.
Sean?
No, that's good.
Okay. So what that means is then this project is done.
Yay.
I will send this out. The next step, though, is that we do need to actually rewrite the document. I did that last time. I remember it vividly, so I'm happy to just do it. Unless anybody wants to be.
I'm happy to just pass it along.
No, it actually is probably a couple hours worth of work. I'm really familiar with it. If anyone wants to be involved and take it over, I don't want to feel like I'm hogging the work, but I'm happy to go do this, and it'll be a pretty quick project. Ridge 2 will come off, and in the appendix we say these are the properties that have changed since last time, and we put in there, that it was purchased by the town for the amount. 3rd Avenue will be a new property that we'll add to it, so it won't have as much information because we won't have, all the other properties had the Smith environmental piece to it that was done in 2005. We won't have that piece, but we'll just describe the property as best we can.
And do we want to divulge the information we learned from our Monday meeting about Rogers?
Don't think so.
Okay.
I just don't think because.
That's fine.
Yeah, we just don't know yet, so.
Okay.
And we will Patrick had a very good point, we'll put a disclaimer in, and maybe it's like an asterisk on each one that we know that has an active development plan about, we're aware there's an active development plan. This is just in case it becomes available, something that's a disclaimer that's saying, we're not trying to interfere with the development plan, but it's just in case, or it's that ideal ranking. So, okay.
I want to make 2 points. Ridge 2, where is that exactly at right now?
So I've heard that that's closed. Yeah.
Totally bought and paid? Yay!
Yeah,
Exciting.
that's cool.
And then I want to note about the NA that I ranked on Town 15. I live next to the Town 15, and we live in Superior, right? So we all live next to a parcel. That's, a given. But to save myself grief from citizens who may make comments or have opinions on that, that's why I did that. So it's not that I don't want to be partake in that. I just want to save myself any stress that may arise.
And that's
You're
absolutely.
saying that citizens might have strong feelings about Town
Weird,
15.
right? No.
But that's absolutely, you're right. And I'm glad that you don't need to explain it, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
If anybody else feels the same way, you're welcome to, send me a message offline. If you wanted to opt out of anything, you're more than welcome. Again, I'll send the full document out so you all can see it and play around with the data. And then, yeah, by next meeting, we'll have a document, hopefully have a document to review to be able to go up on our website. So that'd be good.
Yeah, great work, Ryan.
Thank you, everyone.
I feel like we should apply.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Okay, well, that's huge getting that done. Like I said, the next ranking thing, I guess the next thing we're going to talk about is the next thing we get to rank. So next, Sean, or I don't know who wants to take over the discussion, but Sean, Tracy, or Vanessa on Shan amenities.
Okay.
I'll start with just one note because the line you have here is small, medium, large, asked for from the board. So the 3 of us discussed that, and our consensus was that small, medium, large really, when you boil it down, pertains to cost. So for time's sake and for the notion of trying to save money and not contract it out and get an estimation of cost, we were wondering if we could come up with those figures on our own. So we're thinking about trying to source that information from Patrick, but we'd love everyone else's input on that.
So before we even get to that, Sandy, When we had that dinner meeting and we were talking small, medium, large, what did that mean? Small, what was the
I don't know, I
quantifiable?
didn't say it.
Okay. So,
I think
Unfortunately,
we can read it
that's
either
the
way.
position we end up in, because one trustee will say something and it's whatever that person meant. So my sense is, you know, did you have something you wanted?
The discussion was around the budget, and
Yeah.
if we wanted to have, if, you know, we have a baseline of what is going to be built, and if we want additional amenities, how are we gonna go about asking the board? And that's where I recall that piece of the conversation about it being, well, propose a small, medium, and large around, I took that as a low budget equals small, a medium budget equals a medium, and a large is a hefty plan.
and
That's
Pat-
how I understood it.
And Patrick, how did you interpret that?
Staff has always been directed to advise committee members never to worry about the budget. That's a board discussion.
I mean, for me, as a board member, my preference would be, tell us what are the things that you feel are the most essential to make that the trailhead that you, as OSAC, believe it should be. And then we're gonna put a price tag on it, and we're gonna, you know, you're gonna argue the case for it. The same as, I mean, from my experience with ProStack, we had to go in and argue what we wanted in a park. And then the board would basically say, well, maybe not. So for me, small, medium, and large is irrelevant. What I want to hear is, what are the things that are your top priorities? What are the things that you'd like to have, but if you don't get them, you're not going to go home crying? And the third thing are the things where these are really our pie in the sky things.
Nice to have. Yeah.
Nice to have kind of things. So for me, that's the way I want to hear from you. Size is not, budget's not the question for me, is as long as you tell me why you need that item and why it's an important part of the trailhead. That's what I want to hear. Because the reality is, we can find the money if we believe strongly that it's something that is absolutely, because we can also make a decision of, okay, well, we're not tearing up Colton this year. You know, because this is a bigger priority. So for me, build the case of what you want it to be. Right now, we know you have certain baseline things that you could do because we've got it approved through Boulder County. Now, what are the next things you want to do to make it be whatever you want it to be? Now, I'm not saying it should be the showcase trailhead for Boulder County. It's what do you want it to be as OSAC, as the right trailhead for the town of Superior?
That is incredibly helpful. So then it comes really down
But
to.
again, you heard from one trustee.
But you are our liaison.
But I am your liaison,
Yeah.
and I will advocate very strongly that this is what this group of experts, because again, that's what we rely on you for, to be our experts.
And that's consistent with Wildflower, which got into this discussion that staff at no point in time should ever involve committee members on the dialogue of the budget. Because and if you go back, it's typically a little more painful because we're the ones up there talking about it. Several of us on staff have been politely reminded that we don't get to tell you guys what we think budgets are. You come up with needs. We did that with Wildflower. We went from a $4 million plan. Said, okay, if we're going with the budget, we only have $2 million, so we stripped it out of the park. Then the board was very, very frustrated that we brought back them a stripped out park to match the budget. We said, well, you told us to work with the budget. So that is the process we landed on with Wildflower. That's likely will be the process if we even get that far with Riverbend. So I think that, and then we can figure out through conversations with the board, the cost.
So then it comes down to just ranking, and it's not necessarily a small, medium, large, it's where did our ranking and how do we break that down?
Can I take over?
Yeah?
Cool.
He's
So,
bouncing.
chop down a bit.
As always.
Well, I think the other thing, though, is ranking is being realistic about what your vision is. You know, if you say, we really think a Ferris wheel should go up there.
Right.
You know, you got to think about it from all the perspectives of what a Ferris wheel might mean. So then it becomes not open space kind of thing.
Yep.
But, you know, It is literally, tell us what are the things that you feel the strongest about, and then why.
Very helpful.
So I set up this spreadsheet I was basically built the same way as the ProStack amenities spreadsheet of how they rank things. So what we're gonna ask each, this isn't fully baked yet, we've gotta go back and redo the directions and stuff, but what we're gonna ask each individual committee member to do is go through each of the amenity suggestions that we presented, or Vanessa presented at the prior meeting, and then which had a column for potential for Shan. I think what was discussed is that.
Do you want the lights back on? Or are you guys good with
Yeah.
the lights the way they are?
What was discussed at that last meeting is, I mean, I know that we had
Thank you.
discussed with you, Patrick, about things that seemed reasonable versus not reasonable, but based on discussions after that, we decided that perhaps we just make everything, the potential for Shan as one of the things that each individual person ranks, unless you guys want to do that in a meeting setting and everyone agrees on, these are the sets that we should just focus on. So that's one thing. Second thing is, we're gonna ask everyone, rate each one as high priority, 3, medium priority, 2, low priority, 1. As, you know, so they're in groups of high, medium, lows. And then the next column over would be, what are your top 3? You can have more than 3 if you want, but at least your top 3 of those amenities, what would be your top 3 at least? So that's kind of your weighting system in that case. So for, per group. And then we'll collect all that data, kind of do what Ryan did for our property list, and then come back with, here's our recommendations. So.
Yeah.
So is, just open question, is a 3-2-1 system fine enough?
That was a good question. The only reason we're doing that is because ProStack has been using that. I don't know, has worked well with ProStack or no?
For at least 8 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of detail in this one. I would try that first. It has worked.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different because you're,
I mean, we could do
Yeah.
the same as we did for the properties, 1 through 10.
You know
and
what's
then
been
get-
interesting is anytime there's been like a close conversation, kind of like what you guys were doing, we've had some meetings where like a basketball hoop has been vetted out for like an hour, right? So, but that's a really good dialogue of saying, look, I feel really, well, let's use applicable tennis court, pickleball court. That has shaken out a couple of times, have been like right there. And then the committee says, all right, let's get some really good dialogue around this. And then that in-person conversation will move one above the other.
I guess one other question, what about amenities that fit well together? Like you might have something that if you have this, then you also want to have that. But if you don't have this, then you wouldn't want to have that. Do you know what I'm trying to say? There's like groups or categories of amenities. Is there a way to make that
Sean, do you want me to
clear out?
Do you want me to bring up the ProStack one? Is it helpful for
If
people
you
to
want
see
to,
it?
yeah, I mean, you guys can see how ProStack.
That's another one. There's like a notes section,
Yeah.
and there's been some really good, hey, this really should fit with that.
Yeah, there is a comment column at the end that people can add comments for each amenity if they want to. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks.
I feel like I'm on the committee, but I feel like what he's talking about is maybe a small part of what I'm trying to wrap my head around is, maybe I missed this, but I feel like as a committee, we still haven't put together this overall vision that Sandy's touched upon too, saying is very important. I feel like the ranking, we're looking at these individual things, but I still feel like I don't know what we as OSAC are picturing for this trailhead.
I think
overall.
that should come out in the ranking though.
Yeah.
So when you get
Okay,
your
so-
desires out there, that will show up. The vision should form from that.
Okay.
One interesting conversation we had last time, and it was too bad you guys both couldn't
Yeah,
be
we
there.
heard it
but
on the
did you
video,
listen
yeah.
to the recording about you know, the
And-
concept of to more retain like,
Right, which I mean, I thought it kind of came out of left field a little bit because, and I wonder if it was generated by the amenities that some committees brought forward, like a vending machine. I mean, obviously that's not related to open space and we probably wouldn't consider that. So I would like
well, here's how
kind of the
actually, so I thought
intention
about it
to
very differently.
bring back, okay, yeah.
My thought was, you know, I was thinking about all these amenities and we said, okay, we're not just restricted to the top. We've got this whole piece of property and we've got these whole things, and my mind started going, well, we'll have all these shelters and all these pavilions kind of littered over that whole piece of property. And it almost, you know, when you start thinking about all the amenities, then you take a step back and say, well, now we've lost that kind of view corridor that you have of McCaslin. So that's
Right.
more where I was
Yeah.
coming at it from, what is the vision, right? Are we trying to retain more natural open space? Like the sledding hill is a great example.
Right.
To have a sledding hill, it should be a manicured lawn, right? It shouldn't be weeds, right? Weeds just don't make a great sledding hill, but we don't really, I don't think any of us want to go put sod and water, you know, that whole area to
Yeah.
make it a sledding hill.
That's good perspective, because I did not think of it as like a zillion different amenities cluttered and a man-made mess of a trailhead.
Mhm.
So it's good to know that that can pop into people's head when they
Well,
look at
and
all of
once I
that.
thought about it, I was like, yeah, no, that's not at all what I want.
Mhm.
But I went there for a second.
Right, and so, and that's what I'm saying, that column B, which is potential for Shan, is where people can voice their opinions, yes or no. You know, everyone can say yes, and then we'll say, well, there's a lot of people that want this, you know, within our committee, and say, based on that, and based on the top three, and based on it's a high priority, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
You know, that's how it falls out. So that's, as Tracy was saying, it kind of does form its own.
It does.
Based on each person's opinion, where everyone has an equal voice. And that's the important thing, everyone has an equal voice, as opposed to, you know, there's some strong voices in this committee, me being one of them, unfortunately, but I don't want to I don't want to let anyone else, I fully agree, everyone should have equal weighting, so, yeah, it should fall out, it should.
And the point
Yeah, I just-
of the community input was from 2.5 years ago when I went to COSA and kind of brought that information back, like this is what they're doing in the city of Boulder. They get input from all different areas of the community, from children up to elderly, and that's how they do several projects like their trailheads and like their park development. And it has, which I've sent out to all of you, I think several times, but it shows value and people take pride in it. So that was the idea behind gathering information instead of going to the community at large, starting with committees. And of course, some of that information is not going to be relevant to this at all. And of course, it's a lot of ideas and a lot of information. But then we bring it back here and kind of sort through and see, does any of that even work at all? And it may not. But that was the intention with it. And I kind of made a little paragraph, so just to summarize that we'll send out with the spreadsheet when it goes out, just kind of circling back to the intention of open space and community involvement when it's appropriate.
I mean, and we do want to treat this trailhead as, you know, we're trying to make it special, right? We're not trying to make it like any other trailhead. We're trying to make it a trailhead that other communities, other counties, other states look at and say, wow, look at this cool stuff they've done. It's pretty creative how they've done it and how they've worked it into the art or the landscape and the 14-degree grade, et cetera. And it still looks like you can still have your view corridor and all the cool stuff without looking cluttered.
Can you add, maybe it's just even in like the intro paragraph or something about like what amenities are already available at Colton? Because there might be things that, because they're so close by, that I'm not so interested in us putting at Shan Shan.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, horse trailer parking is
Right.
probably the one that jumps out to me would be redundant. I mean,
Right.
do we need two of them a mile and a half apart?
Right, that would just be helpful, because I think I know
Well-
what's there, but I don't,
It's not even so.
there might be things that I miss.
The other thing we should send out, and I have it somewhere, is just the plan, the current plan, so you can see how much space is there,
Yeah.
to get a feel for how limited the space is actually on top. I don't know if you guys have those.
We do. I mean, Patrick just sent it.
Oh, yeah,
After the
okay.
last meeting, but it would be helpful to also have the space below
Mhm.
that is also available, potentially.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, all that space is owned by, actually not all of it, but a lot of it. The Shan Shan property is owned by the town. Or does Boulder County have an
They have an
easement?
easement over it.
Okay, that's right, that's why we need to get approval. Okay. Okay. One timing question for you. So budget inputs are needed, what, like June, July this year?
July is, yeah, normally right after the 4th of July is the first
Okay.
conversation we have with the board, so.
So are we thinking that we want to get this wrapped up?
Yeah,
and
so
to then
I
by-
will get this out, edited and out very shortly in the next week or so with Vanessa's and Tracy's approval, make sure it's right. But I think by next meeting, if people can go through the process of yet another ranking, so we can culminate that information. Well, the three of us can culminate and then get it out to you guys. after we get
So
it.
your intent is to get this sent out, we would all put our rankings back to you and then be able to talk about the finalized rankings at our next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to fast track this.
I think that's the right path. I mean, I think that's the timing we need to do. I just want to make sure that
Yep.
we're going to have it completed and summarized by the next meeting versus, everybody did their own and came to talk about it at the next one.
I just want to make sure we don't rush.
I do
I mean,
too,
I-
but I don't want to miss.
Yeah,
an
I mean,
opportunity.
but let's say we have disagreements. I mean, there will be another budget year. I mean, I think the goal should be, but if we really feel like we're not ready, let's not beat ourselves up over that. The other thought I had is that if we really feel like we're making momentum and we don't have enough time in a meeting, we could call a special meeting just to discuss this one item. I mean, it might be nice to have a chunk of time just to dedicate to this. I know it would be asking for extra time, but that might be a way to move it forward in time.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I mean, there have been so many people involved in this and so many years that I agree with you. It's important, not just for us people sitting right here.
Well,
Patrick, did you want to show people what
Yeah,
First Act
and
is?
then,
Do that, could you
Sean,
actually
I'm
scroll
actually
up to?
sending you I'm just sending you this, so if you want to start from here, see how Prestec did it.
No, he doesn't want to start over. You should see his spreadsheet. He does not want to start over.
oh yeah, thanks.
Sorry.
So we can kind of just quickly go over it, and then
100%.
So you can kind of see this is just an ongoing list of items that the committee's been considering since, predating me, including some, what they would call non-voting maintenance items, this is an ad for them, which was kind of interesting. But things like exploring an outdoor teen amenity or partnering to use the beach over at Bell Flatirons. But it's, everything from master plan updates to tennis courts to community center. They started just this year doing things like saying, well, it's a passive community center, not an active community center. Is it an indoor pool? Is it an outdoor pool? That kind of stuff. And then each person just kind of goes through and does their, kind of quick rank. Is it a priority? Is it not a priority? And then you can kind of see here at the end,
Yeah, comments.
there's some pretty good dialogue on what people are feeling. It's morphed a little bit over the years. I think this one probably has the potential for town center. Some of that was after we did the 2012 or 2013 Five Parks Master Plan for town center. You can say, okay, yeah, we want it, but we know that it may be coming. So it seems to have worked pretty well. And then it's got an accompanying document with it, which is, typical, just very, very basic description we've really debated whether throwing these numbers in here works or not. A lot of these numbers are holdovers from when we first created it, and it gets kind of rangy because we don't have a good understanding of the install costs, which again, going back to Wildflower, was pretty problematic for us. The committee used this list, and the pricing was only for the specific item. So it was a little bit of a surprise for the board when we came forward with like a $375,000 change order, because the board and the committee said, we want this, and that. Well, it's on your list. It says it's $100,000. Well, what it didn't say is it was $375,000 to put it in the ground. So that's where the pricing gets to be a little sticky. And then what ProStack has done, if I remember, is they've actually kept an ongoing list of stuff that's, sorry, I'm blind as a bat, of stuff that's probably already been removed from the list. And you'll see one of the ones that they liked was the HHR viewing area was a new item that they added on this year, which I thought was great. So, Sean, I shot you both these documents. If you use them, great. If you don't need them, just delete on them.
Okay. I mean, the trail, I alluded to the trail ranking. When we get that, it'll be the same format as this, so it is kind of nice to have a consistent format when we're doing these, so.
Where I think you guys have the upper hand is you guys identified some ground rules for yourself. And we started to hear in the conversations this year that there needed to be, okay, like, is the master plan really an amenity? No, but they were putting it on that list. So, well, okay, how did it get on the list? And nobody really kept the institutional knowledge of how it got on the list. So I do think Corey and the group is working on saying 1, 2, 3 is pretty simple, but it does need some parameters so everybody's playing by the same rules. So.
And speaking of playing by the same rules, I did add a column for where the suggestion came from so that we are wary of, that I like to try to take into account the groups and their suggestions. So I would like to ask that people try to choose things equally amongst the different suggestions and different groups and different committees, because we should value everyone's opinion and not just focus on certain areas. So just try as best you can to get something from everyone.
What if I don't like the suggestions that came from this?
Well, then that's fine too.
Okay.
But I'm just saying.
And you don't like them?
Try. So, yeah, so ours will look very much like that in the trails. We're consistent. Any questions?
I think we're off to a good start.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you for the effort you guys have into this so far. Again, I can tell you guys have put a lot of work into this. Just looking over his shoulder at the complexity of the spreadsheet, it's a lot of work.
It's intense. Sean has done a lot of work on
A lot of colors popping out. It looks. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, moving right along. We're actually on time, which is crazy. This never happened, so this is great. Maybe I just jinxed us, but the next event for us is Arbor Day on April 27th from 10 to noon. Just wanted to get a feel for who can attend that. We don't need to, I can send out an email too and just see who's available. I have not been to Arbor Day before, Patrick. Do we have are there like committee, is it a booth set up and the committee's just like 4th of July and whatnot? Or
This one, we
Chili
definitely
Fest?
don't combine you guys together because we have a little bit more room.
Okay, so we'll have our own.
Right now, I think we've planned for the groups that want to be there, their own booth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will, we should have 1 or 2 people there if we can. I know it's Saturday morning and some of us have kids and athletics that are going through there. So maybe it'd be best I just send out an email and just say who's in, who can make it on those dates, and we'll get a list together. Patrick, I might need to follow up with you on the swag, or not the swag, but the maps and the other things that I was working with Allison prior. Not the postcards, but we said we wanted to have a map of the current open space.
Okay.
And then the latest trail map that we have available, and it might be, it probably actually should be the map that Corey has.
Okay.
now from OSAC. I think that, or no, sorry, from ProStack. He's done a lot of work on the potential trails, and I think that's the best product we have now. With those, and then we'll print off the different talking papers we have on e-bikes and Rocky Flats, and there were a couple others. And I think I have the big green OSAC banner in my house, so I know where that one is. So that sometimes is a chore finding all that stuff again. So
Well, that was from your time being a vice chair. Does
Yeah.
the new vice chair inherit all that stuff?
you know what I think it is my house is pretty close to Community Park, and so it was easy for me to haul it back after after Chili Fest. Okay, I'll get an email out on that. Thank you.
Are we planning to do anything special at the Arbor Day events? Like, are we trying to collect information from people? Are we just providing, like, are we collecting or are we just outputting?
I think we're always collecting input on what do you think on trails, what do you think on property priorities.
Okay, just as long as everyone knows that.
Yeah,
That might be volunteering.
I find that when people want to come over and talk, they'll just mostly say, oh, what do you guys do? What do you guys, what's your main function? Oh yeah, I really love that property. We should get that. And I love this trail. And it tends to be all over the map, but they're usually pretty fun conversations. And I've never had a real heated conversation with anyone ever there. So
Should be pretty
Rob?
easy to talk about the Raptor program.
Yep.
The Red Tail one. That'll still be right there and be really active.
okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Can we bring a scope or something?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is have some binoculars or.
Oh, well, that would be really cool.
Willing to
That'd be
set up
great.
We'd have an
special-
interactive booth.
It would be so cool.
Yeah, do you want to?
I'm not sure if I can
Can
be
someone
there or
commit
not.
to that?
I need to check. If I'm there, I'll
Okay.
bring my binoculars.
Probably.
Talk about it.
You
as
might
much
be
as-
able to talk a community member into, or a few, maybe some other people that are involved in, maybe they just show up and have it there and they could be near our booth or something. That
I
could be
can
pretty cool.
certainly ask.
Because there is a nest near there, right?
Oh, yeah, it's right there.
Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. All right, new business and updates. We did have the RC Superior Trail Connectivity meeting that the board added to our work plan on, it was Monday. So Kate and I and Sean, along with Corey and Todd from ProStack, were there. We met with Bill Jenks, the developer. Didn't think it would be an hour-and-a-half meeting, but it was. We went through a lot of different pieces, and it was really informative for us to see. We really went through the Toll Brothers application, which is the piece that they haven't even put the roads in on the, what is that, the southeast section of downtown, right? It covers Tract H and kind of 36, and there's a triangle there. A lot of trails through there, green space behind the properties. It was pretty obvious to me that they were considering the trails within there. We then looked at the Remington property, which is one coming up soon, which is right up against Tract H, but further west. It's kind of Discovery Parkway comes around, and it'll be kind of the first one that backs up right there. And the reason that was coming up is because we really wanted to we actually had a pretty productive discussion on where should the trail connect through Tract H next to that property, because there would be a piece on the southeast end, or there's a drainage in the middle where potentially a trail could go. So we came up with what we thought was a better connection on the east side, just because it'll flow into the roads better through there. And then we talked a lot about Rogers and looked at some plans there. There's a development coming forward, and probably shouldn't talk too much about it, but if the plan all works out, it'll be good connectivity. I think we were happy with what we saw with something that'll help with through all the connectivity through that area. So the other thing that Trustee Lish had asked us to consider was temporary trail connectivity from that space in, and Mr. Jenks was pretty adamant about not wanting to do that for liability reasons, be private property, and he didn't feel that they wanted to assume that risk. So that was an interesting takeaway, but it made sense, you know, you put a trail in, and then you've got active construction right next to it, you know, that maybe isn't the best idea. So I was comfortable with that. So overall, I thought it was good. I think, you know, the biggest piece will be when we do our trail rankings, getting all ranking, you know, he was showing us the connectivity of the pieces that they were controlling, but we need to make the recommendations on the trails connecting from like Rock Creek in, and, you know, that he doesn't control that property. So there's one place in particular that may be a little contentious, and that's right between the gated community, right along Tract H. So, you know, we'll have to consider that as we do our trail rankings, if we want to rank that high or not. But I think we handle that through our trail ranking process as feedback to the board of how we think there should be connectivity from the existing communities into downtown. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it came up in this meeting you guys had on Monday or not, but am I remembering correctly that Boulder County, I think, is talking about redoing the kind of loop around on the bridge out here?
Yeah.
Is that like going forward?
I don't think it was going forward. I
It's
think
not?
that was in the Boulder County expedited list. That's always been really high on
Yeah,
their plans.
but there's no actual movement on it.
Not that I know of.
John, you can get, so Sean and I had a discussion, and I know we've chatted with our guys in Public Works about bringing that trail through Grasso Park with the water crossing through the historic park behind town that'll then connect over.
Okay.
And then eventually intersect with Rogers, which will eventually intersect with Shan Shan. So that's kind of the workaround on that one.
Okay.
And we're trying to obviously get the developer of Rogers on the hook for
Sure.
making those improvements.
Yeah, I just kind of wonder because that's kind of in the middle of,
It's the key, right?
Yeah, in
It's
between
the
all of
key
that stuff.
you got to get over the river, but not on the road. And that's when you say water crossing, that's what you mean, right? A bridge
Yeah,
across,
one thing
a
like-
pedestrian bridge across the
Almost
river.
like we have down at Autry Park,
yeah.
is what we've envisioned.
Okay.
Sandy, did they bring up, I know that at the work session on Monday, I think it was Monday, RC had presented downtown. Did they talk at all about Rogers and anything that they were doing beyond what they're developing now? Okay.
Monday
I
was
didn't see
strictly to
anything.
talk about downtown Superior and the Main Street development.
And one other thing with Rogers Farm that Patrick was alluding to, having a bridge, et cetera. I don't know, what is the purpose at this point of and the connectivity to Shan Shan, what is the purpose of the rail bed at this point? Is there any purpose to it at all? Can we use it for something, is the question I have.
Yeah, I think it'd be good for you guys to discuss. It is kind of it's a temporary trail that's kind of become permanent. It was the workaround when you did the cloverleaf under here, then got on McCaslin.
Mhm.
This was, we installed kind of a switchback at the bottom of the Shan Shan property as a way to kind of alleviate some of the pressure original town was feeling.
Mhm.
And then during the floods, it became the secondary access point.
Right.
So that's been the really hot button item that, but now with future development, you have another access point. So that's what it served. But yeah, I think if there's a purpose,
So
then you guys should definitely chat about it.
Yeah, so going back to the Shan Shan discussion and how Rogers Farm connectivity plays into all that and potentially using the lower tier of the Rogers Farm. We have parking up at the top. If we have a lower tier and people have access to the bottom, to get between the top and the bottom, people are gonna wanna park at the bottom, which means they're gonna wanna park in Rogers Farm area, and all the people that live there are not gonna like that. So my one potential idea is to use the old rail bed, especially if they're gonna is there a chance that they would reroute the Cold Creek Regional Trail that goes down on that Cold Creek to up where our trailhead is then at that point, since we're not gonna have an access point into Third Avenue there? We're gonna close that down still, correct?
But there's going to be an access point further up on right? I mean, it would be moving it back up near the Rogers development, right? There would still be an access point down there. You just move over, correct?
That's what we're trying to kind of hash out right now, is so the existing Third Avenue would go away, so you would kind of sweep that corner and go up the hill. Or if you were to continue to go straight to basically where the grade goes from the bottom of Shan Shan up to McCaslin, there's like a wooden kind of hayloft there. There could be an access point right there, because, you know, we're figuring that those residents who want to access from the bottom, you know, and whether it's, whether we have the discussion of that, does it get paid, does that become parking? Is it and I don't know, I maybe have to ask Stephen, is that some kind of emergency access for backside, you know, homes or something along those lines?
So beyond amenities, we also need to consider the impact it's going to have on that new neighborhood, that new development that's going on in Rogers Farm. If people have access to the lower part, people are going to, if there's if there's no parking up there, they're going to go down and try and park in Rogers Farm development. And my concern is that the town is going to hear a lot of complaints. So in order to potentially, and maybe there is no good solution other than maybe we should not have an access point at the lower section, because people are going to want to park down there to access it. And that's my concern about potentially, well, if they're going to have access from top and bottom, then people are going to park wherever they can either way. So that was the other discussion I wanted to have tonight about, do we want to have, still consider using that railroad bed or some way of people, I don't know, open discussion.
Is it possible to have access where you'd be able to access as a pedestrian, as walking in, but there'd be no parking signs, so nobody could park there?
I guess. I guess that's the
I
only,
mean,
the only.
Well, that's what's going to happen on third property.
Yeah,
There's going
we'll
to be
have
no parking signs over there.
On Depot at the corner of Third.
What'd you say, Patrick?
We'll add no parking on
Okay.
Depot at the corner of Third, on that strip there.
Yeah.
Because all those people living there are gonna find a way to
Right.
get over there somehow.
Yeah, I mean, contrary to that, I mean, I don't know, you use those trails a lot. I think
All the time.
I'd be pretty upset if I had to go all the way up
Yeah.
and then back down
Just
concrete
Well,
along McCaslin.
I use it a lot, like I'll ride in the morning and I take the bus back to McCaslin, and to avoid going up alongside all the cars at 5 o'clock on a hot day, I'll ride up the gravel, but I get in there on Third Avenue and then just ride up the gravel climb and then pop into Rock Creek. And so I would be a big proponent of keeping the access open there. I mean, the only other option you would have is the new connectivity point in Coal Creek Crossing,
Yep.
which is out of your way if you're going to Rock Creek. So the no parking with access to me makes a lot more sense as, you know, kind of a regional connector, you know, vital piece for between an RTD parking lot and these regional trails that run, you know, Boulder to Louisville and Broomfield.
So the agreement to get approval from Boulder County to do the Shan Shan Trailhead was closing off access at Third.
All access.
Yeah. So you could have potentially another access point off of Third, you know, down closer to the base of Shan Shan.
But that would be fine. I mean, you would just be coming in it slightly east from, 300 yards from where you access it now.
Sure.
It would, you'd still have the same effect.
It's
Yeah.
not as grade friendly, and I think
Yeah.
to Sean's point, is there some on Shan Shan that we need to, because it's 14% right now, that's not an easy
No,
climb
no.
at all. So some kind of,
Well, there'd have to be some trail that would kind of connect over where the existing trail is and just do a big loop, it would seem. Not
so
up.
we've talked about that, but that involves us going back to the county.
Yeah.
to
Oh,
get a
really?
change in the- Yeah, because as soon
To
as
get
you
a
cross
trail.
over into Shan Shan, the bottom part's ours, but as soon as you kind of get
Yeah, just like
then
over to the.
you're on county open space. And we were pretty specific about, we would do Shan Shan Trailhead to eliminate
I see.
some of those kind of access points. So yeah, it's but if we
So-
can work with the developer and get those guys,
Yeah.
my guess is the cattle over there. I know on both, at Coal Creek Crossing and on Shan Chan, we'll have the double cattle gate. So, maybe it's a narrow ped with, the kind
Yeah.
of welded metal mountain bike traverse over it and a double gate or something.
It sounds like that's the only possibility, though, for access, is to have that grade. Otherwise, go back to BOCO, which we want to
Take forever.
really avoid, yeah. On the parking lot issue, I'm really open, but I just don't want to be cliche. I don't want to pay Paradise and put up another parking lot. So I want to just be sensitive to what it's really going to look like, if that's something we considered.
Well, I think we're gonna have a lot of discussion on this with the next amenities for Shan Chan, so
Yep.
we good with that discussion for now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I just want to bring it up as a
Okay.
idea.
Hey, Ryan, can I go back to the
Yeah.
other trails, though?
Yeah,
The
sure.
connectivity from Rock Creek, is that going to be added to the trails list? So we can
Yes.
address that this
So
year
that's
in our
what
ranking?
Corey has done.
Okay.
Remember, last, we had Trail 1 was downtown connectivity.
Mhm.
He's exploded that into all the possible connection points.
Okay.
And actually, I think there's some that we might need to add.
Okay.
So, but yes, that's exactly what my vision is for that, so,
Okay.
yeah, thanks. Okay, Patrick, bicycle-friendly course.
I just wanted to kind of bring everybody into the loop. We were approached by Bicycle Colorado and Boulder County asking our interest in hosting a bike-friendly driver program at no cost. But I wanted to know if it made sense or if the committees were interested in kind of doing a more holistic branding where you say it's not just the town hosting it, but OSAC is interested in getting behind it, ProStack's interested in getting behind it. It's basically an hour-and-a-half course of teaching drivers and cyclists how to coexist better on the roads, and you actually come out of it with some type of certification as being trained to be a safe driver, a safe bike user.
Is this just road or could it be trails too?
I think, my guess is I'll probably touch on some of it, but right now it's that interaction between car and bike on a shared street.
Yep.
And it piqued my interest because the slip lane we have on the McCaslin Roundabout and just getting into the summer season with everybody riding the Morgul Loop. I think it's a great program. We'll probably do something. I just, what I'd like to know from you guys is it something that you as a committee would be willing to kind of, be willing to throw your name behind? I'm going to ask OSAC the same thing. We've looked a little bit at trying to become a bike-friendly certified city. But just want to hear your guys' take on it, or if, they were asking about dates. They asked about National Trails Day, and I said, I don't know that this is applicable for that. But if you guys have any thoughts or ideas on it, or if it's you like it, don't like it, let me know.
I mean, I'll sign up, just as a citizen, because I think I know the rules, but I'd like to know them better.
I think we're gonna have our staff, we may even do a whole separate one, especially like the public works guys, the parks guys.
Yeah, cool.
Because we, you'll see we kind of zone out a little bit. We get tunnel vision driving around in town.
I guess the thought would be, what does putting a committee name behind it really mean? Right, does it mean that our name is on it when it goes out, or
Yeah.
should we be promoting it, or like what?
I was thinking, get the committee recognition behind it as it goes out to the community. And then, maybe at National Trails Day or at the
Yep.
committee booths, if you guys would be willing to distribute information and at least willing to have the talking points if people are interested in it.
Absolutely. I shouldn't speak for the committee. I think that part of it's a no-brainer.
I think it makes a lot of sense, just given the fact, like you mentioned, we're on the Morgul Loop, which is a historic, famous route, which you have a big race every year and lots of traffic just on every weekend. We're in the regional connectivity between Boulder and Denver, and I think anytime you can foster a better relationship between two groups that can be at odds, it's a good thing. It's when I ride around, as a cyclist, the first thing I notice is how many people are on their cell phones. Then I get in my car and then I check my cell phone.
Yeah.
So, it's conflicting interest, but I think it's a good thing for everybody.
Well,
thoughts? Anyone?
I mean, I don't know that it has a lot specifically to do with open space, but I think it's a great idea. And the more that we can do to promote it, the better I would be happy about as a cyclist myself. And since, many cyclists go from road to trail and back and forth, maybe it is kind of open spacey if I think about it more.
Is there any negative aspect of putting our name behind it? Is there any reason not to? Looking at it from the other side.
There's no negative side, it's just a matter of how do we tie it into open space? How does it impact, people getting to and from open space trails or whatever? You just gotta figure out a way to tie it into.
I think you just nailed it though, right? We're always working on how do we build new trails to get people out to open space. And while you can't, right, while you're coming down McCaslin from over by, El Dorado, you've pretty much got to ride on that road to get down to the Colton Trailhead. I mean, I guess you could weave in between, but that's our focus. Right? Let's get people on open space.
Until recently, the Marshall Road, which is now going soft surface, which will eliminate some traffic on that. But I mean, there's a lot of pieces where even if you have separated trails, at some point you're going to have to be on a road and interact. So I think there is a tie-in. I mean, maybe it's not perfectly seamless
Well,
for OSAC.
as long as we can, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
As long as we can.
I think we can. I don't think anyone would call us on it.
They might ask about e-bikes, but.
Yeah, well, we have a talking paper on e-bikes, so there you go.
Here, take both at the same time.
I'll send you guys some information and keep you in the loop.
Okay.
As we look at structures, dates, but I appreciate it. I think the more groups in town that support healthy bike-car interaction, the better.
The next one is National Trails Day. Is there anything you need from us for that planning? Are we good?
I sound like you guys and Allison had already gotten this thing fairly well baked.
Yep.
So she let me know today that she's getting ready to order swag.
Okay.
You guys are good to go.
So just keep that on your calendar, June 2nd, if you can.
Are we doing a giveaway? I forget.
Yeah, we decided last time we were doing sunscreen this time.
But I mean, raffle.
Oh, the raffle. We said we would decide that as we got closer. It would just be something we'd go pick up at Costco or somewhere local in town as a giveaway.
Should we decide in May?
Yeah, probably. We'll just decide and go
I'll just
get
put
it.
it in the minutes. That
Yeah,
we'll have.
perfect. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, Coal Creek reconstruction.
It's going along. I don't know if you guys were able to see it over the last couple of days, but we're starting to get grades finalized out. You can now see the trail the entire way.
Mhm.
Peter had asked about some plant species material. It's actually kind of fun because if you're down in there, you can see all the wetland plugs soaking in the water. So I know that they're getting close. They actually use those wetland plugs in the willows to start to pin in the matting, and then that matting integrated into the fibrous mat has the seeding. So it's all starting to kind of shake out. We're probably tentatively going to say mid-May for almost
Oh, wow.
100% completion on this phase of the project. That's all the plant material going in. The creek is here maybe in 2 weeks, going to go from the temporary diversion channel. That'll get shut off. It's going to get flipped over. Then all the dirt mounds that you see now will go and fill in that diversion channel. So we're still working a little bit with our resource manager from Matrix Design Group. You'll probably appreciate this. We're getting to that time of the year, so she's getting a little anxious for us to get out of the environmentally sensitive area, which is the standing trees that are left. There was some ground cover in there that the EPA and Matrix deemed very valuable. So we're getting excited.
Do you know what species the standing trees are?
I think there's crap willow. Yeah, I can find out though.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll probably have that on one of the original reports. But my understanding is that everything down there was a little bit of cottonwood or the multi-branched crap willow that we left out. That area that they asked us to keep actually had more to do with the ground cover to the Preble habitat. And just the fact that plant material existed in a corridor that they trapped a Preble further upstream, we were required to then once we have it close to finish, my goal will be to throw something together on a, maybe a Thursday or a Friday, have you guys pro stack. And then I think Matt has asked that we do something separate with you guys on the board to walk it if we're interested, and then we'll probably do some kind of community celebration this summer to get people on the trail, new 10-foot wide trail.
Is there going to be
Why are
any?
we separate?
You can join in.
No, I'm just saying, I was sitting here going, why wouldn't you just have us do it with ProStack and OSAC? That seems a little weird to me. So.
Makes my life easier.
I'm just sitting here going.
Because you're special.
There you go.
No, we're not. And it would be kind of nice to do it with OSAC and ProStack and hear your all's comments and reactions to it. Because you guys are the ones that did the work. So you can say that. Trustee Hammerly said,
Perfect.
why does the board need some, maybe because of the fact that we have a number of folks that travel. But most of them are, if you do Thursday or Friday, they're usually back in town anyway.
So you'll see.
I'd just like to hear you guys get excited about it.
You'll see guardrails go up here close to McCaslin around the storm detention. All the cool drop structures are in. We've had them go back and start to fill in all the little cracks. So it's been interesting to listen to the guys who are a little more water focused. They're very interested in seeing how trickle down happens and splash downs happen, and making sure that like the lower level of erosion becomes this healthy environment for vertebrates. And we're starting to get to that point where we'll have to test, right? So we're going to have to, I had mentioned to Ryan and Kate a while ago, we're going to have to do long-term monitoring on that site. And we may choose to throw some kind of camera down there, just so over the years we can see it kind of grow. Yeah, it's getting exciting.
So once that's done, has there been any news about the progress of Parks 1 and 2? So it's just we're gonna have the creek and then a lot of mud around it, basically.
Well, we had, at the board meeting on Monday at the work session, we actually had a little bit of encouragement because Bill Jenks talked about the fact that they thought they were getting to the point where they might be able to go out and look at some of the next phase of funding. So at least he said the words Park 1 and 2 in conjunction with the fact that there might be money coming available, whereas normally he says, not for a long time. But, so it seemed much more positive, and I think that's because they are starting to develop the downtown area, and as they get more residents, they're getting pressure to have the rest of the amenities. So I felt a glimmer of hope.
And we've been asked to turn over the grading plan for the creek and the parks to a group who is going to start to do preliminary work designing the bridge. But that's about as far as we got. And the bridge is separate funding all on them. So I'm with Sandy, we're starting to see kind of things line up, maybe, that indicates that we're getting closer.
Okay, thank you. Standing updates. Tracy, anything from the Conservation Fund?
I have zero, other than things are slow. Sandy, do you have anything? Okay, so nothing this time.
Okay. Rocky Mountain Greenway and Rocky Flats. Joel?
So probably the most prominent thing is Trustee Lasis and his motion forward on oil and gas drilling under Rocky Flats. That's going to the Stewardship Committee. I believe the last I heard it was like put into the summer to vote on, like they didn't vote on it last.
June 6th. Yeah.
June 6th?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, they tabled it.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean they're going to vote on it in June, but they tabled it. So.
Okay, perfect. That's the most notable thing that's come up. I've not gotten any stewardship updates, and I've been so busy I didn't realize that until I started thinking about what updates we had here. But I'll go back and make sure I haven't missed any that I haven't sent out to everybody. But I don't know if I've fallen off that list or something, but I'll find out what's going on with those.
Anything on Jefferson Parkway?
No, when I was going back to my email, catching up over the last week or so, I saw the thing that Tracy had sent out about voting in, I think it was Broomfield and Arvada, where the two communities were voting on funding, right?
Arvada voted, they passed it. Broomfield votes April 23rd on their portion of the funding.
Wow, that's coming right up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I received a communication this week from staff at Boulder County who wants to meet with us about having the Colton Trail be designated as part of the Greenway.
Mhm.
So that's the latest that we've heard. So a route from Highway 128 to existing Colton down to Colton Trail. So I'll keep you guys in the loop on that.
So that would be an
Yeah,
interesting
please do.
route, because
Yeah.
it's not necessarily clear how you would do that.
Yeah.
Well, where from 128 you come across, that would be the.
Right, and my immediate question was why not go west? And their feedback was because that transitions into single track, where if you come to the east, you're on wide path,
Yeah.
which is, and then they want closer connectivity to 36. So I'll keep you guys in the loop on that, because that's
Okay.
obviously gonna need to have some dialogue around it.
Yeah, the Greenway routing changes constantly. Like every map I see, it's different. So it's always interesting to see what's being proposed and where it goes. But I was at a meeting last Saturday at Boulder County and Boulder City, and they talked about how, I think it's Boulder City is allowing e-bikes on some trails. But then if you look at the Meadowlark, there's a sign that's no e-bikes, but that's Boulder County, but they explained it that they don't want e-bikes on that portion because then it feeds into Boulder City where they're not allowed. And so there's a lot of kind of, you could be on this trail because it's not immediately adjacent to this trail where they're not allowed and some things like that. And I expect we'll see some of the same things with the Greenway because e-bikes would be probably more prevalent on the Greenway than they would on
And
other
then the
trails.
other thing that I very quickly mentioned to those guys is we've consistently in our recommendations to Boulder County have asked for trail upgrades and drainage upgrades to the Colton Trail.
Mhm.
So our expectation would be that there's some kind of, if you're gonna route this thing this way,
Yeah.
then we've been consistently asking for some upgrades. So let's have a conversation about that.
I've been told that that's in like the Southern Grass
Yes.
Management Plan, which was supposed to be due like 5 years ago and then the flood, and it's coming back up soon, but not
The person I talked to from Boulder County at Trails Day last year was talking about that they
About
were
the
starting to move on that, and she did specifically have discussion on how the Colton Trail might look different up through there. So it sounds like we're hearing it from multiple angles, so that's good.
I'll keep you guys, I think we were looking at a first week of May type meeting, Town of Superior, Boulder County City Folder.
Okay. Well, thank you. Oil and gas, I guess trustee Lacis's issue is a big one. Marcia, you would normally update us, but also, what is it, Senate bill, is it 181? Is that the one that's now, I think, on the governor's desk for signature? So that's a,
I think it's signed.
Did it get
It's in-
signed?
Yeah, it's in place because they put, there was a Crestone permit in Boulder that was going forward and they halted it because this new legislation went in. So I think it's in place.
I didn't hear anything about it being signed, but slated to, and expected to.
well, I mean, we can Google it real
Sure,
quick
yeah.
and figure out, but it's
Yes,
moving, right?
splitting hairs.
Moving,
Yeah.
moving in a way that is good for our community, considering what happened last fall. So that's good. All right, Raptor program, Vanessa, Peter?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. But first of all, we've got, of the three Great Horn owl nests, they each have 3 babies in them.
Wow.
Because they're different ages, because they hatch at different times. A few of them we didn't realize had 3. We thought they only had 2, and we just realized they have 3. So we've got 9 babies in town right now. And the
Keep yourself
3,
alone.
yeah,
Man.
the 3 red
She's
tail
awesome.
hawk nests are still active too, and they should be laying eggs soon and on the nest. And that kind of brings up what I just wanted to ask about the events at Autry Park that are going to be happening right when they're laying their eggs and potentially with their babies. I assume nobody's going to be blasting a boom box or anything with I think there's like a grand opening for the new bike thing too, coming up soon. So I think it'll be okay, but I just still thought I'd mention that that's just April, May is gonna be kind of a critical time for that nest at Autry. They're there because they're used to the normal activity, but if there was something that was really not normal, a loud noise consistently, that could keep them from coming back to their nest when there's babies there, and that wouldn't be good.
So is that a subtle way to tell me to keep my children away? They're unusually loud.
I've heard from some people in the community that sometimes people at the bike area will come and play music real loud. And, but most people, if you hear that or see that, and if you just go ask them to not do that and explain to them why, they're like, oh, cool, and they just want to know about the nest, and then they turn the music down, so it's always been fine.
We did add language to the existing sign down there, and then we notified the sheriff's office to patrol that. So I think we, some to the effect of no amplified noise, because we get it somewhere.
That's awesome. Yeah, good for the neighbors, good for the birds. And the other thing is, I wanted to ask you, Patrick, we kind of came up with the idea of putting together a map of where the nests are, just for our benefit, but we were wondering if that would be a benefit to you, to the city, if they would want to have a map of where the nests are and pictures, from every angle showing where they are, if that could be helpful to you in any way, then we can provide that.
I've been sharing all the emails that you guys sent me with our park staff since they're out there. So any input you have would be great.
Okay, we've started kind of putting that together, and Peter's done a great job getting it started, so we'll...
And they, I think what'll likely happen is they'll want to add to it with stuff that they see. They let us know about all kinds of stuff.
That'd be great. I know. I'm sure they know more than we do.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thanks. That's everything. Bye.
Okay, that's our agenda. So meeting adjourned at 8:40.
It's a miracle.
Man, that might be a new record, yeah. Only 10 minutes over.